everybody, it's Romania Black, and guess what we're on? We're on volume 3 of HOB. I'm so excited. So I have taken a good solid week and a half off for holiday break. I finished volume 2, I took some break to go visit family, and then came back and was like, what's one of the first things I want to do? Is start volume 3 of Heaven Official's Blessing, of course. And look at this cover, look at this. I got this a while ago, very long ago, and I know I did like a reaction to the cover for volume 4 on here, and I haven't seen the cover for volume 5. I'm gonna wait with the remaining volumes and let it be a surprise, and then show you all when I open it up and we do the next like chapter or whatever that I'm doing for this novel, and we can I can react to it on camera with you all. But I had this for a while, but I remember I just looked at the cover and then put it on the shelf back there and was like, I don't read the back, so because I don't want to be spoiled. But look at that cover. I have so many questions. So many questions about this cover because one, you'll notice on the spine, it's the red pearl. The red pearl that I believe old Hua Chong stole and took with him after meeting Xie Lian. So I think that's what that is. Or maybe it's just a metaphor. Maybe it's metaphorical. We talked about pearls and cherries in the last set of chapters. Maybe it's just a metaphor. Who knows? But this volume cover brings to light many questions because when we left off at volume 2, we were still in the flashback. Now, granted, Xie Lian had ascended, so I have a lot of questions. One, obviously at some point this is going to happen, maybe. So I'm wondering if by like 3/4 of the way through this volume, if we'll like get out of the flashback, because MXTX and Modao Zushi did that quite a bit. In Modao Zushi, MXTX was back and forth in the flashbacks constantly. And so you'd go you'd flash back to the present, then you'd find something else out and go back to the past, and you'd keep going back and forth, which is fine. So I'm wondering if we're going to do that in this series. There was a commenter that said, and I can't exactly remember who it was, but in one of my last videos, they were like, congratulations, you finished volume 2. 6 more to go. And I was like, it doesn't hit me. It's not hit me that this series is this long. It's not hit me yet how long this series is. I'm like, oh, we're 2 volumes in. Modao Zushi is a total of 5 volumes, I'm pretty sure. And that was a long story, but this is a third longer than that. I was like, So it's kind of crazy, right? Kind of crazy, but I am really excited for this volume. I really love this cover. It's very pretty. I don't know what all is going to entail in it, but maybe we'll flash back and forth to the present. I don't know. I'm reading chapters 69 and 70. I do have the first few parts mapped out. I figured out that there's actually going to be some segments in this that are going to be fairly long, so hope you're all ready. But this one's actually the shortest segment that I'm reading of what I have mapped out so far. So I'm looking at my little sheet. So this is actually the shortest segment, 69 and 70, but I didn't want to go in any further because it's parts 28 and 29 in the book. And I'm like, that's enough. So chapter 69 and 70, I have no clue where we're going to go to in this novel. When we left off, Xie Lian we got the narration at the very end that the Goshi warned Xie Lian. He's like, you need to go experience the world. You don't need to ascend yet. You need to become more worldly. Figure things out. You have great ideas. Now go see the world and see how realistically this could work. What happens? He ascends at age 17. Like you do if you're Xie Lian. And so with that being said, I do have some questions before we dive in, or some comments before we dive into volume 3. I do have some comments, and so let's dive into those. SQQBLH314 talks about how, brings up this good point, and not only them, but also a few others brought this up as well, that, so if Xie Lian ascended to be a god, who took over Shanla? Because I didn't realize this at the moment, but yeah, we don't get any mention of Xie Lian having siblings. He seems like an only child. He seems to have like only child syndrome. And we assume that maybe he has relatives because we get Anla, who comes later on, and I'm assuming Anla is not like a descendant of Qi Rong. I can't imagine a woman with Qi Rong, to be honest, or at least willingly. So where does that leave us? I'm assuming that some relatives end up taking over Shanla as it stands. But the next in line to the throne is technically like Qi Rong. But how does that even work? Is Qi Rong technically like a bastard in that viewed in that regard? Because his mom ran off with a bodyguard and not royalty. How does that work? But the concept that Qi Rong is like the next in line for the throne of Shanla is absolutely terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. I was like, oh, So I'm wondering in the novel going into volume 3, if we're going to get some context of what Shanla's contingency plan was in case if their son ascended. Did they think about that? Because the Goshi seemed like he was pretty certain it was going to happen. So I'm like, did he plan for there to be like a backup plan in case Xie Lian ascended? What we do? We'll see, I guess. But that was that comment. They also said that Xie Lian took what they learned from the Goshi in volume 2 and technically applied it later on to Lan Chanshu when he was talking to him as the Goshi of when he was the Fang Shen. And I was like, oh yeah, that's really cool. I liked that a lot. But what do I have also on here? Also, Xie Lian, there was like 3 things that SQQLBH said, and that wasn't the second one. The final one was that Xie Lian cannot read fortunes, and the Goshi never taught him. So the funny thing is, when he read Hua Chong's fortune on the cart, and I didn't realize this either, I know we talked about in the last set of chapters that Hua Chong has been trying to like seemingly jog Xie Lian's memory of how they know each other all these years. But when Xie Lian read Hua Chong's fortune, he busted himself because he can't read fortunes. And Hua Chong's had like the worst fortune of all time. And so he was just like, you can't read fortunes at all. Interesting. But also I find that interesting because Hua Chong seemingly is supposed to be like the most ominous star of solitude and have all this terrible fortune, but he actually has some pretty good fortune. But again, they established that the star of solitude, you're okay. It's just the people around you are doomed. Fair enough. But I thought that was hilarious that Xie Lian just busted himself as not being a fortune teller by trying to tell Hua Chong's fortune, and Hua Chong knew it. So that's funny. So there's that. Shizun. Shizun said that the Goshi, Mei Nianqing, is one of those, I love how they described him as one of those astrology-driven people that, like, you know, I find astrology fun. I think it's hilarious. Sometimes there's some things that are kind of eerily accurate, and it's kind of like, wow, that's interesting. But I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, you're an Aries, we can't be friends. I mean, I live with an Aries. Huckleberry's an Aries, so just so you all know. But I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, we can't be friends because you're an Aries. We're not compatible. Sorry. I'm not like that. But I feel like the way Shizun described the Goshi of Shanla at the time, that he's one of those people. He's like, oh, Xie Lian, Hua Chong, I don't know exactly what Hua Chong is. I don't know what his sign are, but he'd be like, he's not compatible with you. You can't be seen next to each other. He seems like that type of person, which is kind of hilarious. Pei Chu talks about how Xie Lian took the 2 men in 1 cup story and tweaked it to tell Lan Chanshu. Xie Lian has taken a lot from Mei, the Goshi of Shanla at the time, and has converted it into when he was the Goshi himself, like taking notes from his mentor and applying it himself to his new mentee, right? And Lan Chanshu is kind of like Xie Lian back when he was a kid. So there's that. Only I feel like Lan Chanshu, I don't know, there was maybe more innocence about him. It's hard to compare the two now. But Xie Lian also made it in that story to where a third party intervened like he wanted to originally. However, I think it's interesting that Lan Chanshu, without knowing Xie Lian's past and without knowing Xie Lian's connection to this anecdote, says that maybe that was wrong. There shouldn't have been a third party to begin with. So now when you go back and think about that story during the whole thing at Yong'an, whenever Lan Chanshu was like, well, there shouldn't be a third party involved. It's none of their business. They don't need to get in the way. It goes back to Xie Lian. It basically, Lan Chanshu just pointed out how Xie Lian's entire philosophy about being that third party that provides the extra cup was a bad idea. And Xie Lian's like, well, you figured it out right off the bat. And here I am 500 years later going, So that's interesting. I think that's really cool. So thank you, Pichu, for saying that. As well as Qian Fong. Qian Fong says that it's kind of said the same thing as an SQQLBH about Qi Rong, and that Xie Lian's Jade story is a sign that he actually wants others to shine. and works to that end. So I like that. When I read the Jade's anecdote in the previous chapters, I thought it kind of had like an arrogant tone to it, and I was like, oh, you're kind of being condescending. But Qian Fong's like, no, it's just that Xie Lian, he sees the potential in people and he wants to bring it out and make them shine. And I'm like, okay, I like that feels more Xie Lian and has a little more positive tone to it. So I'm all about that. Good. And then finally, Molly MIGH. I laughed so hard at this, but basically Molly MIGH was like, man, Baby Hong, he was like a little spitball. He was fiery, like just sitting there kicking and screaming, trying to bite. Could you imagine him like trying to storm the heavenly realm to take on the 33 gods like that? And I died because I was like, oh my gosh. I just now picture this little like 10-year-old Hong, like just storming up to the 33 gods, like lightning and thunder coming off of him. To bite and kick and scream at the other gods. I'm like, that's amazing. So yeah, those are my comments. I'm really, really excited to dive into this book. I've waited a solid week and a half. I do want to talk about the Manhua. We'll talk about that. Manhua chapter 86. We'll talk about that when I'm done with this and go over it. But oh, y'all, the good part is, the crazy thing about this is we kind of left volume 2 at a nice end note. It ended with him. We ended volume 2 going right back to where we were at the very start of the story. And I have a feeling MXTX is going to do that quite a bit. But I liked it. I was like, all right, cool. So now the question is, where do we go to from here? Are we going to extend the flashback even further? Or are we going to go back to the present and then come back? I feel like we've still got some flashback to go. I feel like we're not ready to go back to Xie Lian and Qi Rong just yet. I feel like we've got to figure out some other things first. But we're now at the point where Xie Lian's ascended. So how will we get to see what Shanli, or we're going to get to see how Shanli responded to that moment, what their contingency plan was, how Qi Rong responded to it. We kind of have gotten bits and pieces of what the end result was. But now I'm excited that we're going to go back and see it all take place. So that's exciting, but I poured myself some coffee. I'm like, let's do this. So with that being said, we are going to start chapter 69 and 70 of Heaven Official's Blessing. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Chapter 69, Fishing for Offerings. Boar meets Crown Prince. Unveil! Okay. A red brocade and a roaring cheer. This was a golden... Oh, they're unveiling a statue of the Crown Prince. Oh. A sword in one hand and a flower in the other. Oh, I love that. Okay, but we just cut straight from him ascending to like the how Shanla reacts to it. Okay, right. It's symbolizing the power to end the world, but with a heart as gentle as a flower. If that's not a representation of Xie Lian that we've seen so far, the power to end the world, but gentle as a flower. He's a cinnamon bun that can shank you, right? The face of that statue is soft and beautiful. The brows long and elegant, lips thin and clean, slightly curved as if smiling. Affectionate, but not coquettish. Fierce, but not heartless. It was a compassionate and handsome face. The 8,000th temple of the Crown Prince within the kingdom. So yeah, they've made 8,000 temples. Oh my gosh. 3 years after Ascension. Oh crap, we're good. We're good. Cut right straight to 3 years ahead. We're going to cut to 3 years ahead. We're just going to get to the calamity now. Okay. Okay. I'm not freaking out. I'm not freaking out. We're just cutting right to it. Okay. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's great. I'm like that dog I'm literally that dog with the cup on fire. Like, no, this is fine. We're just going to cut 3 years later. No worries. It's fine. A passionate following was unseen in history and likely would not have any more like it in the future. The one and only. I wonder if Hua Chong's is similar. I mean, obviously not 8,000 temples, but it seems like Hua Chong's underground following is kind of similar. However, this temple didn't have the most glamorous divine statue of the Crown Prince. Atop Mount Taisang, the summit where the Crown Prince resided in his youth during training, was renamed the Crown Prince Summit. It was where the first Shanla Pavilion was built. Once the first divine statue of the crown prince was sculpted, it was there where the king personally unveiled it. Interesting. The divine statue was 5 meters high. Its craftsmanship legendary. It was built of pure, solid gold. Truly an invaluable golden body. Oh, interesting. And the devotees were endless. I can't imagine all the incense. It'd just be, ugh. And the donation box was also much bigger than your average donation box in other temples. It wasn't built big enough, and it would be full of offerings before the day was over. Oh. There was a clear pond filled with coins. Like, everybody's just donating all this money and everything. And the turtles didn't dare peep their heads out anymore from all the coins that were thrown, many bouncing off their shells. No matter how many cultivators asked people not to do so, it was fruitless. Within the massive red walls were plum trees, the branches tied with countless bright red ribbons of wishes, painting an impressive scenery of flowing red amongst a sea of blossoms. As for the interior, Xie Lian was seated just below his divine statue, watching over the crowd. No one could see him, but he could see and hear their chatter. Oh. Why doesn't they have prostration cushions? Yeah, even the temple master said we can't prostrate. Oh, okay. The Shanli pavilions are all like this. I hear after His Royal Highness ascended, he sent dreams to many temple donors, to the temple master, telling them not to have the devotees prostrate. So none of the temples have where you can pray to him. Oh. Oh, a few laugh. A few laughed. What's the logic? Aren't we meant to prostrate before the gods? That must have been a rumor. We must kneel. Only kneeling can show our sincerity. Okay. So even when he's like, we'll take it slowly. Okay. If I obtain it, I will return my gratitude. Pray for safe passage. The girl I likes my Qi Rong. Please make him uglier. Please, I beg you. I won't believe I still can't give birth to an effing chubby brat. Oh my God. There were all kinds of prayers, and Xie Lian was getting a headache just listening, and hurriedly cast a spell blocking out those endless voices. Oh. What the hell are those prayers? They didn't sense the appearance of the man and continued kowtowing. Xie Lian breathed a sigh and patted his shoulder and laughed. Feng Shen, thanks for your hard work. Oh. An exuberant Shanli pavilion, the number of prayers Xie Lian could hear every day exceeded thousands. At first he was filled with the energy brought forth by the new position and had little care of whether the matters were big or small and worked through them personally. After a while, there were really too many prayers, so he'd split off a block and gave them to Feng Shen and Mu Qing, what was within his duties and what he could be ignored. After filtering through the prayers, the two would pass the important matters back to him. Okay. Feng Shen could understand why there'd be so many who blindly pray over petty business. Even blessings for harmonious bedchamber matters were brought to the Shanli Pavilion. Yes, oh God, no. Feng Shen, he's probably heard so many terrifying bedside stories about the demands of these ladies that Feng Shen's like, I can't do it. Oh my God. Shanli was a martial god and certainly couldn't take care of such things. This kept up and offended other heavenly officials too, blaming them for taking matters they had no control over and taking devotees they had no business to take, which Xie Lian could not rebut. Feng Shen still had his hands covering his ears, even if that gesture did nothing. Why do you have so many female devotees? Oh no! Well, I mean, why he doesn't? The statues are gorgeous. Xie Lian's gorgeous. Why wouldn't he? Xie Lian shook out his sleeves and remained seated within the clouds of incense, smiling. What's wrong with having so many female devotees? Beauties are like the clouds, pleasing to the eye. Shanla people do love their beauties, clearly. Not good at all. They had no other prayers than wishing to look nicer, marry nicer, and give birth to a nice son. Nothing of importance. Just looking at them gives me a headache. So, Feng Shen, not heterosexual confirmed? So, he grinned and was about to continue, and suddenly there was a commotion. They looked outside and heard someone speak. Prince Zhaojing has come. Get out of here. Prince Zhaojing is here. Oh, hearing Prince Zhaojing, it was like everyone heard the devil. Oh, so Qi Rong is still alive at this point. All drop their faces and dispersed like birds. They just, just get out of here. A moment later, it was as if a tornado blew by, and all the devotees who were in the hall escaped. A young man dressed in lavish brocade and a cape crossed the threshold, swaggering, a glass gem lamp in his hands. Ooh! His face resembled that of Xie Lian, but seeing the eyes, one would think of him overly cocky. It was none other than Qi Rong. So he'd reached the age of 17 or 18 by now. Okay, so he's older now. His face broadened, his disposition much more mature, and he finally had an air of nobility. So he's not a childish brat anymore. He's pompous. He entered but didn't allow any of his attendants to come in. He held the lamp with both of his hands. I love that he has the lamp already. Like the ghostly green lantern. He already has the lamp. Oh! He raised the lamp to his forehead and solemnly prostrated. Oh, he knelt down. The two on top of the altar shared a look. Function smacked his lips, and Xie Lian understood the annoyance in his eyes. 3 years ago, when Xie Lian first left the royal capital to travel the world, Qi Rong was still in detention. After his return, he hadn't yet had the chance to see his little cousin before he suddenly ascended that very night in his sleep. Within those 3 years... Oh, so Xie Lian ascended in his sleep? Within those 3 years, Xie Lian sent a number of dreams to his parents, to the Goshi, and a few others. He sent one to Qi Rong once, admonishing him to be kind to others, and then on, to keep his behavior in check and not to cause trouble. So he only sent one dream to Qi Rong. Thus, Qi Rong had been doing his utmost to build temples everywhere, offering donations for lamps and good merits. Oh, the lamps! The green lanterns! It all goes back to him building the everlasting lamps and everything to honor Xie Lian. Oh! He had worked hard, sincere to the bone, but he would still stir up trouble every now and then, and it would be Feng Xin who had to go clean up after him. Xie Lian could understand Feng Xin's annoyance. Cousin Crown Prince, this is the 500th lamp I've offered. I'm such a loyal little brother. Will you come to see me? Even a dream is fine. Uncle and Auntie both miss you dearly, but you only ignore us. Truly high and mighty and cold. Holy cow. We've got so much to talk about. He did not notice at all that Feng Xin was right there, who was reminding Xie Lian, don't pay attention to him. The Heavenly Emperor told you that unless it's a matter of importance, heavenly officials are not allowed to show themselves privately before mortals. Families must be avoided. Oh, well, present-day Xie Lian has certainly, certainly ignored that very important fact. Okay, we'll talk about this. Interesting. I know. He rose to his feet holding that lamp and reached for a brush and started writing on that lamp with his head lowered. They felt bad, so they approached to see what he was writing. Seeing that it was something normal, like pray for the country's prosperity and blessed climate and so on, and not praying for some family to be beheaded before the marketplace or such, the two breathed a sigh. Xie Lian was reminded of something. When Qi Rong first returned to the palace with his mother, there was once a group of royals and nobles who mounted Mount Taiseng to pray for blessings. Qi Rong's mother was a returned Yi after having eloped with a lowly peasant and didn't dare to see anyone, but she always wanted blessings for her son and have him experience the world and not be stuffed inside like herself, turning into an ignorant nobody. So she begged the queen to bring Qi Rong along. Although it was already kept fairly low-key, a royal scandal went around faster than an arrow, and there wasn't anyone in the royal capital who didn't know what happened to that mother and son. Thus, along the way, many sons of nobles purposely left Qi Rong out, not playing with or talking to him. Xie Lian saw a swing set and ran over to play, and all the children of the same age ran after him, taking turns to push the crown prince on the swings, taking it as an honorable task. When Xie Lian was swung to the highest point, he subconsciously looked down and saw Qi Rong hiding behind his mother's shadow, a head peeking out, watching him with envy. Oh, shit. Okay! Oh, my God. Once they reached the great martial hall, the grown-ups, after having offered lights, moved to beg the Goshi for fortunes, or for deciphering their fortunes, and conversed amongst themselves, leaving the children within the hall to offer up small lamps for play. It was Qi Rong's first time meeting the queen, and he did not know she already offered a light in his and his mother's name. He saw how beautiful the lamps were, and wanted to offer one up for blessings too. He was young and didn't understand much, so he asked all those around him to write words of prayer for his mother. The children from Qi Rong's branch of the family already detested him, under the influence from their elders. They thought the mother and son had shamed the family, so they intentionally tricked him. Oh my God, the tie of Qi Rong and the lamps to his mother and to Xie Lian. Oh my gosh. Oh, when Xie Lian finished writing on his lamp and put down the brush, he heard malicious giggling from behind, and we turned to say he saw Qi Rong with his hands covered in ink, holding a lamp like a precious treasure, his face full of smiles about to offer the light. Yet on that lamp the words, "Pray my mother and I pass away to the heavens, Qi Rong," were written in ugly scribbles. Xie Lian broke that lamp on the spot, furious and outraged. Oh my God. He wasn't very old at the time, but all the noble young men and children were terrified, prostrating on the ground afraid to speak after containing himself. So Xie Lian he gets a temper, and then it's not good. He personally rewrote prayers on a new lamp for Qi Rong, and no one dared play any tricks after that. Later, when they descended the mountain, Xie Lian went to swing on the swings again. This time, Qi Rong emerged from behind the queen and pushed him. He was shorter than Xie Lian, but he pushed especially enthusiastically, still gazing at him from below. Only this gaze had changed into one of worship. After that, he became Xie Lian's tail wagging behind his cousin crown prince. It must be said that Qi Rong had once been somewhat normal, but somehow had become more and more off track along the way. In those 3 years, there were too many people and too many matters Xie Lian had to care for. He had no time for relations of old. He certainly didn't know whether Qi Rong had matured. And while he was still reminiscing, Qi Rong had already offered his light and was getting ready to leave the hall. Unexpectedly, he backed away. He bumped into another. Qi Rong staggered and then whipped around and started cussing without even seeing who it was. "What the hell? Are you blind, or did you die on the spot forgetting to move?" And then they said he hasn't changed at all. He's still the same. Maybe it was because he had lived with his father until he was 5, but couldn't help but be influenced by the rowdy market environment and his father's violent temper. But even after the queen patiently tried to educate Qi Rong, the moment he got agitated by the Goshi's words, he'd reveal his true form. Oh my God, there's so much on Qi Rong we're getting in this chapter alone. Are you Whiteboard Coon's gonna have to come out. There's no getting away from it. The one who bumped into Qi Rong was an unkempt young man of 24 or 5 years, carrying a simple satchel, his straw slippers so worn they were almost rimless and baseless, covered in dust. However, even though this young man was wan and sallow, his lips dried and cracking, his form slumping, his face was bright, thin but not weak, and his eyes were shining. What is this place? This is the Shanli Pavilion, the Temple of the Crown Prince. The Temple of the Crown Prince, so this is the palace? Is that gold? Of course it's gold. The Temple of the Crown Prince is a temple, not a pavilion at the Imperial Palace. You don't even know where you are. Where did a barbarian like you come from? Then where's the palace? Why do you ask? I need to go to the palace and see the king. I have something to tell him. Where did this country bumpkin come from? You want to do what at the palace? Want to see the king? Is he someone you can just see because you want to? They probably won't even let you through the gates when you get there. I'll go try. Maybe it'll work. Then go try. Thanks. This is just random dude. I thought it was Hua Chong for a second, but 3 years after the Ascension, Hua Chong would only be technically like 13, right? He wouldn't be 24 or 25. When he reached the stone bridge, he suddenly stopped. Layers upon layers of coins could be seen sunken below. The young man seemed to ponder for a moment, and then he leaped off the bridge railing and jumped into the pond. He started fishing up bundles and bundles of coins and stuffing them into his satchel in his arms. He's stealing the offerings. They were stunned. What the F? What are you doing? What the actual F? Oh my God, what the actual fuck? Oh my God. The fact that that's the translation. What the actual fudge? He was also skilled throwing punches and kicks, not letting anyone close. He was jumping up and down in rage. None of the cultivators in the yard could do anything. He fished up a bag full and heavy with coins, carried a satchel anew, and was ready to climb ashore, but he stepped on moss, his feet slipped, and he fell backwards. You dare steal this money? Oh. He raised his leg. Feng Xin was already standing on the side, catching the right moment and blocked, so it looked like Qi Rong's stomp was vicious, but it actually landed lightly. Although Qi Rong couldn't see the one playing tricks, he still felt something was off, like a ghost clinging to his leg. Oh, so they can't see him, but he's stopping them from doing it. Okay. Oh, interesting. The young man seemed to have choked water, coughed a few times. The money was just lying there in the pond. Why can't I use it to save people? Oh, save who? Who are you? Where'd you come from? He only asked so he could sentence that young man to a crime and throw him in prison. But that young man still answered honestly. My name is Long Ying. I'm from Yong'an. We're going through a drought. There's no water. The crops won't grow, and everyone's starving because there's no income. The water's here, and food and money. You use gold to build statues and throw coins into the water. Why can't you share some with us? Yong'an was a large city within the kingdom of Shanla. Xie Lian rose to his feet, his expression serious. Feng Xin, there's a drought in Yong'an. How come I didn't hear of this? I don't know. I didn't hear anything either. Let's ask Mu Qing later. Why does this always go back to Mu Qing? Why is Mu Qing the source of all cliffhangers? What is this? Why are you monopolizing them, Mu Qing? Yeah, this Long Ying. Okay, all right. Okay. I was about to say, I was like, as soon as I saw Long Ying, I was like, isn't that the bandaged kid? There's a note that says this Long Ying is not the same individual as the ghost child Long Ying from the present timeline. The character for Ying is different. This character versus that character. They do look different. Okay. I was about to be like, what's this time traveling nonsense? Wow. So, Qi Rong backstory, huh? Okay. Let's do this. Chapter 70. Fallen golden statue. Boar, berries, suffering sun. Oh. Okay, so Xie Lian calls Mu Qing. So he came out of that remote palace, that remote place, Yong'an. Truly barren lands produce unruly radicals. Oh, Qi Rong. You think you can rob the gods just because you're poor? Then I won't rob. I'll pay my respects and worship this god of yours right now. I will kneel and kowtow and beg him to give me money to save the lives of the people of my hometown. But will he do so? Oh. So Qi Rong's like, if I say yes, this guy wouldn't actually run away with all the money like it's his right. His Highness the Crown Prince has become a god now, and gods are busy to death. Who has time to mind you radicals? I didn't think he'd care either. It's not like we never prayed or begged, but it didn't work at all. Those who are meant to die will still die. Xie Lian was shaken, and another cultivator shouted, You to be so disrespectful in the halls of God! Aren't you afraid of heaven's condemnation? But Long Ying replied, It doesn't matter anymore. Condemn me if they must. I'm no longer afraid of not being saved. So why should I be afraid of being condemned? Oh! Qi Rong gave a wave, and a number of guards waiting on the side rushed forward, surrounding the young man, and started beating him down. Feng Xin was still working to soften their attacks, and it not only appeared like Yang Ling was being pulverized, However, he was in a dazed state, not avoiding or evading, but only occasionally he raised his hand to protect the satchel on his back. On the side, Qi Rong grabbed a handful of melon seeds and munched, shaking his head. Oh my God! Hit him hard in the name of this prince! The very image of a mobster. Hearing him call his own title, Long Ying shot his head up. You're a prince. Prince of what? Do you live in the palace? Can you beat the king? I'm your granddaddy! What? You still think you can see the king, don't you? His Majesty's got a million things on his plate. He got time for you. Oh my God, Qi Rong's saying I'm your granddaddy. I need like the shades on him and stuff. What the fudge? What? MXTX, what is this? He twisted his neck stubbornly. Why hasn't he got the time for me? Gods don't have time for me, and neither does His Majesty. Then who has time for me? Just who should I go to? Does the king know just how many have died in Yongin? Do the people of the royal capital know? If they knew, why would they throw money in the water rather than giving it to us? It's our money, and we'll spend it as we will. Even if we use it like stones to skip in the water, it's nobody's business. So why do we have to give it to you? What, you've more reason just because you're poor? It was incredibly inappropriate for the time and place. Xie Lian was about to find a way to seal Qi Rong's mouth when just then a black-clad youth appeared in a hurry from just behind the pavilion. Your Highness sent for me? Mu Qing, come over here quick. In all the prayers you've received recently, have you heard anything about the drought in Yongin? No, I haven't heard anything. How could you not? The refugees have already escaped here. Oh, I told the truth. There wasn't really anything. Are you trying to say I'm purposefully withholding information? Well, did you receive anything yourself? I'm on duty at the Temple of the Crown Prince on odd months. You're on duty on even months. Of course they are. If there are people from Yongin praying for the end of a drought, there's no reason all the drought-related prayers were sent in on odd months and you knew nothing. I didn't say you did it on purpose. You think too much. Okay. All right, Feng Shen didn't mean anything. Both of you stop this instant. Oh. Drag that robbing crook to the prison and lock him up. Yes, sir. Let's deal with the problem at hand first. Save this man and I'll ask about him. And I'll ask him about Yongin properly. Ooh. Your Highness, what do you plan to do? You can't just casually show yourself. After Ascension, that was one of the rules Xie Lian just couldn't understand. The heavenly officials said they needed to help the common people. Yet they all put on airs and positioned themselves above mortals, barring themselves from appearing before the mortals at will, which often restricted him left and right and center, causing much frustration. Good thing Xie Lian also had a number of ways to get around this. Without blinking, he raised his hand and pushed. The people standing just ahead noticed the shadows on the ground shaking and turned around confused. Xie Lian had pushed his own divine statue over. Xie Lian! That sword and flower-holding, kind and beautiful golden statue swayed back and forth and slowly toppled onto its side. Qi Rong looked as if he had just seen his own mother kick out of the stool after hanging herself. Oh! His heart bursting, and he lost all mind to care for Long Ying as he rushed desperately to grab a hold of the leg of the statue, stubbornly trying to keep it upright, screaming in fright. What are you useless trash all waiting for? Help me hold him up! Don't let cousin Crown Prince fall. He can't fall. While he was terrified into distraction, Xie Lian passed by him calmly and casually and stepped out of the hall. Their faces dropped to the ground. Your Highness, that was your own divine statue. Again, self-sacrificing, doesn't care what he does to himself. No, but man, Qi Rong's reaction, oh my god. Something like a fallen statue was a bad omen, a type of taboo. Xie Lian! A heavenly official who'd push over his own statue like that was unheard of, a rarity in the three realms. It's only a big chunk of gold. If I didn't do this, their attention wouldn't shift otherwise. You two just keep pushing down on that gold statue. Don't give him a chance to leave. I'm going to go meet with that man. Oh my god, Xie Lian! Ah! And the guy doesn't really know who he is because he doesn't understand he's a god. Okay, this makes sense. They were still speechless and could only obey. They obediently stood next to that divine statue, each using but a finger to press it down. They only needed to use that bit of power, and it was enough. The ones on the other side, holding on, had to use every ounce of their strength, and still they could only keep the status quo, their teeth gritting. This is indeed pure gold through and through, such weight. Long Ying, who had fallen on his bottom, saw that those guards were no longer attending to him, and he stared at the golden shrine of that divine statue for a long while before he rose to his feet and dusted himself off, and ran away carrying his satchel. Ooh, okay, Xie Lian's following him. Oh. And he transformed into the form of a little white-clad cultivator. Uh-huh, okay, all right. Is it the white robes he's been wearing now, perhaps? Making sure nothing was amiss, and swung the whisk. A whisk like the Windmaster. Oh. The young man's hands were large, and one gouge was enough to create a wide and deep dent in the mud. Bun dust flew as he dug. He looked like a black feral dog. He was wondering why he was suddenly digging holes when he saw him wipe off the mud on his pants, scoop a handful of water with both hands and bring it to its lips. Oh. He took out a water bottle from his charm sleeves and passed it to him. He had made a puddle to get water. Oh. Oh, thanks. My friend, where did you come from and where are you going? We came from the bay of Long Air in the city of Yong'an. I was going to go to the royal palace, but I've changed my mind. I'm not going anymore. We, me and my son. Xie Lian was growing even more confused, but his heart was dropping. He watched as Longing removed the satchel from his back and opened it. My son. Inside that satchel, he was carrying the dead body of a small child. That infant was a tiny creature, looking no more than 2 or 3 years of age. His face was yellow, his cheeks sallow, and his head had a few strands of thin and yellowing hair stuck to it. There were even rashes. That little face was twisted into a strange expression, as if crying, very much miserable. His eyes were already closed, but his mouth was open, nevertheless no longer able to make a sound. Xie Lian's pupils shrank, and his spirit shocked to the core. He was unable to speak. No wonder he had felt this young man had a strange air about him. He couldn't describe what the strangeness was, but just that it was abnormal, the way he spoke, the way he behaved. It was like he didn't consider consequences at all, blunt and berserk without a care. But by the looks of things, for what did he need to consider consequences? After showing him his son, Long Ying wrapped his child anew and carefully stringed him up the fringes. Watching how focused he was in his actions, Xie Lian was miserable. It was his very first time seeing the dead body of such a young infant. How did your son die? How did he die? I don't know how he died. Thirsty, hungry, sick, maybe a bit of everything. When I first carried him out of Yong'an, he would still cough a bit, and he called, "Dad, Dad," on my back. Gradually, there were no more cries, only coughing, and then there were no more coughs. I thought he'd fallen asleep. Later, when I found something to eat and wanted to wake him up, he wouldn't wake up. That child had died on the road of escape. I don't know how to take care of children. If my wife knew our son died, she'd yell at me to death. I really wish my wife could still yell at me. Oh my God! Oh! His expression had been calm the entire time, like a branch off a withered tree, a pool of dead water without a trace of life or ripples. Why don't you bury him? Yeah, I wanted to pick a nice place. Here's not bad. There are trees to block the sun and water too. I'll go back after burying him. Thanks for your water. No, don't thank me, don't. Oh. It was some time before Xie Lian remembered that just giving the water wasn't enough. This man was returning to Yong'an. Here, take this. He looked at what was in Xie Lian's hand closely. It was a deep red pearl, no bigger than a nail. Its luster smooth and sleek, polished and brilliant, and soul-stirringly beautiful. Even if you didn't know what it was, just one look and it was obvious that this little gem was invaluable. This was indeed that one remaining red coral pearl earring that Xie Lian had worn during the heavenly ceremonial procession 3 years ago. That pearl left a rather deep impression on Mu Qing, so the moment he saw it, his face changed. Long Yi didn't reject it, as if any proper manners or concerns of a normal person had just left him, and he reached out his hand to receive it. Thanks. He removed the satchel on his back and gently laid it into the dug pit. He was... Damn it. Dad will come back soon to visit you. He used his hands and solemnly pushed the earth back to cover the satchel. Xie Lian used a hand to support his forehead and closed his eyes, and a moment later that young man left in a stride. Your Highness, what did he bury here? He said, Dad, he buried someone? Your Highness, I went and investigated earlier and figured out what happened. Yong'an has never been a wealthy place. Their temples and shrines are few in number. It seems they have a local rule where those who don't offer donations can't pray. So those who visit the temple of the Crown Prince have all been the wealthy, and the poor suffering from disasters can't even enter. Xie Lian didn't respond to the report, but said in a low voice, you two, go to Yong'an and see what the situation is. I will go meet with the Goshi and ask exactly what's going on. His face had never been this dark. The two subordinates didn't dare be negligent, and both acknowledged his command, departing an instant after. Xie Lian himself thus turned and raced towards the direction of Mount Taisang. It appeared the disaster in Yong'an could only be big and not small. But even if he couldn't hear the voices of prayer, it didn't mean those at the royal palace had no clue at all. Oh my gosh! Ah! Oh my gosh! Well! How about that? What? Welcome to Volume 3, where in the first 2 chapters we got ominous things with Xie Lian and child death. Damn it, MXTX! Oh my god! Girl does not play around. Does not play around. I was like, oh my god. So this guy, Long Ying, which I'm glad it's a different Long Ying. Glad it's not the same one. I was about to get my tinfoil hat on, being like, how is this the bandaged boy? No, it's a different Long Ying. It's coincidental. It's interesting. So, it's interesting. Man, what a set of chapters. Am I right? Oh, I was like, we're only reading 2 chapters tonight. What could be in these 2 chapters? Apparently a lot. Apparently Xie Lian getting super pissed that things aren't going good in Yong'an, and he hasn't found out about it, which there's so much in these 2 chapters. There's so much that is being established with how the heavenly officials work and how Xie Lian has approached the matter. And there's some things that I'm not saying that it's Xie Lian's fault at all, but there are some things that I'm like, but what would Xie Lian do? So, lots of questions. This set of chapters also gives me a bigger appreciation of Qi Rong. He's a very tragic character, and I know a lot of people hate him. He's a trash king, but God, there is a part of Qi Rong that I'm like, man, if those little kids hadn't been such bitches to him, maybe he wouldn't be eating people now. You know? Maybe not. God, it is so true that how you are treated as a kid can impact you into adulthood. Very much so. And God, there's just so much with these 2 chapters. There is so much happening. So many parallels, so many callbacks, so many ties. MXTX, what you doing? And that's even before we get to Long Ying. That's even before we get to him, his dead child, like Graveyard of the Fireflies level of disturbing. I'm like, he carried his dead son in a sack all the way to the city and then was like, oh, you guys have all these puddles of gold that's just sitting here when my people are dying and you're not doing anything with it? Okay. I think what makes it more disturbing is that it's within their own kingdom, that Yong'an is part of Shanla. It's like, I don't know. It's like if in the US they were just like, Utah, figure it out yourselves, I guess. You know? And I never think of Utah. So that state, I'm like, yeah, that state. There's somebody from Utah in the comments being like, oh, well. But seriously, it's like, it's not even the fact of it being a country far away, right? And of course, Huckleberry this entire time I've been reading has been having this ball at my feet being like, why aren't you throwing it? And I'm like, because I'm reading Heaven Official's Blessing. But now I'm going to throw this while I talk to you all. But yeah, it's crazy because, you know, I could understand the Goshi and the royal city and everything and the king if it was a different country, right? And that's really sad to say, right? That's horrible to say. But if you had told me that Yong'an was its own country outside of Shanla and they weren't being helped, I'd be like, well, that's awful. They should be helped. But I understand why the government isn't, because it's not part of their country. They're like, we've got our own kingdom to worry about. But here's the thing. Yong'an is part of their country. It's a city within Shanla. It's within their borders. But they're not doing anything about it because they're so corrupt and greedy. And it's like, damn it, that's awful. You know, and it's such a thing that happens in real life too. And I'm sure MXTX is drawing upon real life experience for it. And it sucks. I'm like, no. It's just, God, it's so crazy, right? But humans, But humans, they do get selfish and they get conceited and they get materialistic and they don't want to give up their earnings, right, to those that didn't deserve it, right? You know, there's that argument all the time of like, well, they need to make their own money. And I'm like, it's not sometimes that simple. And yeah, there's a point to that, but then in the other, you know, vein, it's like that kid's dying and you're not going to help him. Okay, what if the shoe was on the other foot? And I feel like that's what's leading up. Like the shoe is about to fall on the other foot. Because guess what? We start this novel off 3 years later. You know what happens 3 years later? The damn white calamity comes and causes the human face disease, which I have a feeling the human face disease is going to be a big old metaphor for Shanla, and that it couldn't save face to help its own people from dying. You're slowly building up, MXTX, what this entire series is kind of leading to, and I'm getting curious, but yeah. I'm gonna put Whiteboard Kun over here. So yeah, let's talk about these chapters. Oh my god, I'm like jacked up now. I'm like, okay, so 2 very succinct, good chapters, packed full of stuff. I guess before we dive into these chapters proper, there are a few things that I think we should go over, and mainly it's Manhua chapter 86. I missed Manhua chapter. I missed when the Manhua chapter, or I thought I was missing when the Manhua chapter was coming out because I was going to be on vacation when it was supposed to be out in the English translation. Well, lo and behold, there was a delay, and so it ended up coming out today as I'm recording this, and I'm like, okay, good. I didn't miss anything. We're all on the same page, but the chapter, of course, chapter 86, we're back in the simpler times with the Manhua. We're back where the Windmaster and Xie Lian are still at Paradise Manor, evading cannibals. Back in those days, remember how fun those times were? How simple things were? Oh my gosh. I feel like that's the one thing with this Manhua, is reading the chapters alongside where we are currently in the novel. I'm going to be like, man, those were simple times. Get like a nostalgic trip in that moment. So yeah. The Windmaster, I do love how much detail Star Ember gives on the buns on the Windmaster's hair. It's absolutely amazing, right? Them buns. And where the Windmaster calls the cannibals barbarians. And there's this cute panel of Xie Lian where they're like, being a heavenly official is hard work. Looks like both ghosts and gods have it tough. Like, oh, Xie Lian. I long for the simple days of Cinnamon Bun Xie Lian. I long for the days, because Xie Lian now, and in this flashback, is going through some rough times, right? I also love that this panel here, where Xie Lian is being told how the Windmaster's like, that's Hua Chong, what a ruffian, what a foul rogue. And Xie Lian's like, I mean, rather than calling him scheming, it's more accurate to say he's just playful. I'm like, Xie Lian, you are the biggest, like, get outer for Hua Chong, like the biggest cover for him, because Hua Chong could be like killing a mass colony of people, and Xie Lian would be like, now Hua Chong, should you really be doing that? Now maybe we should spare them, you know. But here's the thing, Hua Chong I do not think would harm a mass amount of people in front of Xie Lian, because he doesn't want Xie Lian to think badly of him. So that's the difference, right? That's the difference. And then I do love the Windmaster, even in like the garments there. He has like the broad chest and everything. Star Ember does such a good job of drawing him and making him look distinct from Xie Lian. I like that. And then we get the Earthmaster. Look at the Earthmaster. I love that the Earthmaster, one thing that's really cool that Star Ember does is they make the Earthmaster in male form look very, very similar to female form, just a little different. Just little tweaks different. But like the way that their hair falls, the way that some of their features are drawn, it's just with a little few tweaks, the gender would change. But I personally, I'm sorry, but you see the Earthmaster's ponytail thing where it's got the spikes coming out of it, like looks very Bowser-like. Hell yeah, I want that. Earthmaster's over here like punk rocking it up. And I love that the Windmaster's like, it's you! And then Xie Lian's like, oh, do you guys know each other? And the Earthmaster's like, I don't know him. I love it! We've never met before. We have no clue who each other are. Nope, never seen him before in my life. That's so funny. And the Windmaster's like, what do you mean you don't know me? Like, no fun, Mingzhong. I'm your best friend. Someone who runs around dressed like that is no friend of mine. Like, come on, like your poor fashion taste. We're no longer BFFs. I love it. I love Xie Lian's like, oh, is this the Earth Master? And then the Wind Master's like, yes, you've seen him before. No, he hasn't. I love the Earth Master does not want to admit that they've been running around as a lady with the Wind Master. I'm like, I ship them so hardcore. I love it. But then this is the thing too, and this kind of ties back to this set of chapters in a way, is at the very last panel where the Earth Master's like, yes, it's me, and they like cough up the blood. Yeah, I am the Earth Master. It's me. I was the one that sent the dragon flare out to get you guys to come here in the first place. And Xie Lian goes, we saved the right person. Oh my God. So yeah, the Manhua was a lot of fun. Chapter 86 was a great time. I really liked it. The artwork was gorgeous. I love that now we have the Earth Master looking fabulous alongside the equally fabulous Wind Master. Xie Lian's circle of 6 degrees of cinnamon bun deity continues. But yeah, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about these two chapters, chapters 69 and 70. In the book, there is one picture, and we'll talk about it when we get to it. But there is a picture that was in these two chapters that we can go over. But yeah, fishing for offerings, boar meets crown prince. There was something that I did want to look up. I was a little curious about it, and it was the whole concept of the boar, right? I did want to review that, because what does a boar mean? It's like B-O-O-R. It is an unrefined, ill-mannered person. Ah, okay. An unrefined and ill-mannered person. Okay. How about that? Okay, so the boar meets the crown prince, which is quite curious. At first, I thought it was Hua Chong. At first, I was like, oh, well, this person's Hua Chong in disguise. But when they said they were 24 or 25, I'm like, timeline doesn't check out, because if it was 3 years after Xie Lian ascended, Xie Lian's about 20. Xie Lian is about 20. Qi Rong's about 18. And Hua Chong would be about 13-ish. It's weird to think that Qi Rong is older than Hua Chong, because I would never have guessed that. This whole time in the series, I've been thinking that Hua Chong was so much older than Qi Rong, but that wasn't the case. And that's so bizarre to me, because Qi Rong just doesn't seem to act his age, right? But yeah, so we established some things. We established some things about Shanla that I think are pretty necessary to point out. Shanla definitely lives up to the idea that it is of excess. A lot of excess. Like, within 3 years, there have been 8,000 temples built. That's a lot. A lot. In one kingdom. Within 3 years, right? And they renamed the top of Mount Taisang. They renamed it the Crown Prince Summit. Which seems like so cheesy. You know, here in America, when someone passes, it's funny when somebody big passes away, or they want to do like something to honor somebody, they'll name like a theater after them or a road after them. It'll be like the Tracy C. Burnham Memorial Highway or something like that. This is kind of like that. It's just kind of, it's cool that you want to recognize, I guess, in Mount Taisang's defense, it is the top of their biggest mountain. So that is pretty honorable. It always feels weird to name a highway after someone. I'm like, just a piece of asphalt. But here, the Crown Prince Summit at the highest peak is interesting. I do find it interesting, too, that the mount, the top of Mount Taisang, these people have been all about, Junwu. But is Junwu really better than Xie Lian in their eyes still? Because at the start of these chapters, we had them worshiping Junwu. And now it seems like they're building all these temples for Xie Lian, giving power to him. And it seems like they've almost put Xie Lian above Junwu at this point, which is rather interesting, right? But it's the local homeboy, right? It's the hometown kid. Like, yeah, we got this guy we've been worshiping for hundreds and thousands of years, but the local kid. And he's hot. So it's like, it's understandable why. And it's the king and queen. It's their son. So of course they're going to order them to build temples, whether it's public opinion or not. That's, unanimous. So yeah, and then the statues. They have the divine statues that are 5 meters tall, so around 15 feet. 5 meters of pure solid gold. To have over 8,000 of them, that's a lot. It's a lot of gold to have at a temple, right? And not only that, they had ponds. This was just one pond of the 8,000. One pond. And maybe not every temple had a pond. Maybe not all temples had a pond, but I'm sure a lot of them did. But the ponds were overfilling with gold coins. Like enough to where the turtles wouldn't come up because they're like, we're gonna get pelted with coins. Like that. It's just the idea of getting rid of all of this treasure, right? And just throwing it in these ponds. And then I did think there was the branches of the plum trees that had the red ribbons on them, and the ribbons had prayers. Now that stuff, you'd be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like tying the little ribbons, the red ribbons to the plum trees, like that'd be really pretty. And that's probably not that expensive. So sure, do that. But just tossing coins, just tossing them into the ponds and just leaving them there. And also making note that the donation boxes were bigger for these temples, which is going to come back and bite here in a moment when Long Ying is like, we have to pay to pray. And it's like, shit, right? So they have the trees, they have everything. But despite all of that, here's the thing. Xie Lian is not allowed to interfere. Junwu has been very specific, being like, you don't interfere with the ways of mortals. You let them do their thing, right? So Xie Lian, all he has been able to do, and we'll talk about this here, is that he's gone into the dreams of the temple leaders and said no prostrating or cushions to do so. So Xie Lian does stay true to his ideals that he doesn't want people praying over him. They don't want them prostrating to him. He's not about that life, which is nice. There is a little part of me, though, that was like, Xie Lian, your goal is to save the common people, but you have all this gold and all this wealth here. Surely you aren't naive enough to think that everything's fine in the kingdom, but he is. But he is. He has no clue. And which you can't blame him in some regards, because he probably was expecting that if there was problems in the kingdom, people would pray about them. So there is a part of you, when I was reading it, I was like, oh, well, Xie Lian, this is all extremely excessive. Like so much gold, so much wealth just being thrown, going nowhere, except probably into the pockets of the royal capital and the people that are running the temples. So it's like, why aren't you giving this back to the common people? But here's the thing. Xie Lian, one, would know if they were praying to him about any problems. So if he saw a problem, he'd probably like try to... You would think that Xie Lian would try to get the temple leaders in through the dreams to give the money back if he saw a problem. But because Yong'an cannot enter the temples, Xie Lian does not hear their prayers. That's a very weird mechanic, and it's kind of scary because the idea is that unless you have a temple and unless these people can go and pray to it, you don't hear their prayers. That's a really interesting world building thing, that if you don't show up to the temple and pray, it won't get heard by the heavenly officials. That's kind of crazy, right? So Xie Lian has no clue about Yong'an because nobody's been able to go in and pray from the poor people there. They can't afford it, so no one knows that they're suffering. That's fascinating. That's fascinating. And it sets this crazy idea up that, yeah, these people are just completely cut off from any aid from above because no one knows they're suffering. And for Xie Lian, because he can't go down and like walk amongst the people, he doesn't know what's going on. It's a cool contrast too, because we'll put Xie Lian right here. We'll put Xie Lian right here in the blue. That Xie Lian does not, let me get this right, does not have access to prayers of people outside the temple, which is why he doesn't hear the Yong'an prayers. I mean, the sad thing is, this is the sad thing. he ascended too soon. That's the thing. He ascended too soon, because if he had been able to travel all over Shanla, he didn't even know about Yongin. That's the thing. He did not know of Yongin. If he had been able to travel and see the world like the Goshi told him to, then I think of Yona of the Dawn, which is an anime, a manga series. And in Yona of the Dawn, there's a character, and she's royalty. And I won't spoil the plot for you all, but just basically, she does end up going throughout her kingdom and seeing her people in despair and in trouble. And she kind of laments the fact that she's like, man, I was stuck up at my palace this whole time, and I never realized that people were suffering like this because I didn't go out and see it myself. And that's kind of the thing here, too, with Xie Lian. Xie Lian was not able to fully go out and explore the world like the Goshi had wanted him to, and see just the disparaging situation that was between the people like of Yongin and the rest of the country. So because Xie Lian didn't go out and wasn't able to see all of this, he didn't know that there was suffering like this even going on. He grew up in the palace. Why would he know? Why would his father and him don't communicate much to begin with, but why would his dad tell him, like, oh, by the way, son, there's parts of our country that are kind of like in this really bad situation of poverty, but we're not going to do anything because we're going to hoard the money for ourselves. Just wanted to let you know that. You know, he's not going to tell him that, right? And Xie Lian, for whatever reason, ascended before he had the chance to go out and explore it for himself. And then once he had ascended, then it was like all hands on deck, right? So it's so curious how he wasn't able to get a full grasp of how his country was before he ascended. And then once he had ascended, all of his time and energy was devoted to the temples that the people suffering couldn't enter. So it just created this big paradox, right? This big old loop. Interesting. So in any case, I like the idea that Xie Lian says that they're not meant to worship him. And what does he say here? Aren't we meant to, though? Yeah, one of the I'm trying to like read the handwriting of my own notes. One of the guys that's there in the temple says, well, aren't we supposed to pray to the gods? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Well, that's the setup so far, but it's not seeming to... That's the setup, but clearly there are people falling through the cracks. Clearly, as Long Ying is about to express to us. What's interesting to note here is that during this entire situation, throughout the 3 years of ascension, Mu Qing, again, doesn't complain, does his job, is very quiet, but Function is very vocal. I like that Mu Qing and Function are complete opposites. Absolutely opposites. Mu Qing is odd, Function is even. But I like that they're such opposites. And Mu Qing does his duties without saying a word. It's like he's a deputy god. What can he complain about? And Function, he's very vocal. He hates all of the useless prayers because he says Xie Lian is a martial god. He's like, he's a warrior. He's supposed to protect the people of Shanla. Why does he have to answer prayers about girl needs? It establishes so hard that Function is not into ladies. MXTX is all but saying this man is highly gay and does not like women. So you know that, right? But yeah, basically. And so he's just, I love that the female devotees really bother him. It's kind of hilarious. But here's the problem. It's created this big mess, right? Because there are so many prayers. There are so many prayers because there's 8,000 temples. There's so many prayers that Xie Lian has to split it between Function and Mu Qing. They all have to split the prayers. He can't answer them all. It's crazy, right? It almost is like, you know, like some content creators are like, we have way too many comments, we can't answer them all. And it's like when there's a little part in the beginning of chapter 69 where Xie Lian is like, I tried to answer them all myself at first, but then it was too much, so I had to give them out to somebody else. I'm like, damn. It kind of reminds me of like an author when they have like so much fan mail. They're like, what do I do with this? So it's interesting, right? That he has so many prayers he's not able to answer them all himself, and so he ends up dividing them between Function and Mu Qing, which kind of makes sense, right? That's why they would have deputy gods to help them with that sort of thing. They help them filter out. And then in comes Qi Rong, 18-year-old Qi Rong, which these chapters, did I feel a little bit more sympathy towards Qi Rong? I did. I did feel a little more sympathy towards Qi Rong. And some decisions of Xie Lian, they're so questionable. They're questionable, and I understand them. And at the same time, they're really sad. And I'm just like, damn it. Why did it have to be that way? Because the whole time I was reading chapter 69 and 70, all I could think of is, meanwhile, in the present timeline, Xie Lian is about to stab his cousin, and Qi Rong is laughing his head off that Xie Lian's fallen into this monstrous state. And then we come back to this flashback, and it's horrifying, the difference between them, right? So, God, why didn't it hit me the last 7 or 8 parts of this read-through? I'm glad y'all didn't spoil me, because it was just like a big light bulb ticked off in this chapter, and I was like, and I'm so glad you didn't spoil me, so thank you all. But the idea of the everlasting lights and the lamps, this whole motif of Qi Rong and the green lanterns, the lamps, his mom, Xie Lian, the queen, it all connects together. And it's like, oh my God, that motif. It's a motif that has lasted 800 years. And it's so crazy, right? Because we have the idea of the everlasting, lights being connected to wealth and the idea of pay to pray. And he's brought 500 of them throughout these temples. They established several chapters ago that one of these lights was worth like the lifetime fortune of a family. And Qi Rong has 500. Bit excessive. Just a wee bit excessive, right? Does he need 500? But here's the thing though, right? That Xie Lian ascended in his sleep, which is interesting. Ascended in his sleep. The Donghua almost makes you think that he like saw Junwu on the side of the road and was like, time to ascend, Xie Lian. But it said in the book that he ascended in his sleep. The only other thing I could think of is he ascended while Qi Rong was in his sleep. That's the only other thing I could think of. But still, it's interesting. But he ascended in sleep before he could see Qi Rong while he was on his journeys. And what's kind of insane is that it says that Xie Lian sent a number of dreams to his parents, to the Goshi, and a few others that were in the cool club. But Qi Rong, he only sent one dream. And that dream was to be kind and not misbehave. That is the only dream he sent to Qi Rong. And that's so curious to me, because there are moments throughout these 2 chapters where it makes me wonder, why did you act this? Why didn't you do more with Qi Rong? And it's curious. And I'm not blaming Xie Lian for Qi Rong turning out the way that he does. I think there's a host of reasons why Qi Rong turned out the way that he did. But there are some things where Xie Lian keeps himself at a distance from Qi Rong throughout this story, especially during these chapters. And there's a part of me that got really sad reading it, being like, Xie Lian, if you just reached out a little more, maybe it would have made a difference. But we don't know that for sure, right? But it could have. Like, he only reached out once to Qi Rong. And Qi Rong, who is obsessed with him, took that one meeting and was like, I've got to see him again. I know, if I build all these temples and I do all these things, will he let me see him again? And he says, even if it's a dream, why couldn't Xie Lian meet him through a dream? I feel like Xie Lian was worried that he would just be stoking the fires of Qi Rong's behavior if he kept visiting him in dreams. So I can't blame him for not doing it. But then there's a part of me that's like, it didn't help either that you didn't visit him in the dreams, because then he just became even more obsessed and tried to do more and more to get you to show up. So it's kind of like it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. So what do you choose? And Xie Lian chose to not do anything. He chose not to do anything. And that's kind of funny, because it's like going back to that story of the desert, the 2 men in 1 cup. Xie Lian's like, do I visit Qi Rong? Nah, I don't want to make matters worse, so I'm just going to stay away. But then it makes matters worse. And so it's kind of like, what does Xie Lian do? What can he do, right? And so he's only told by Xie Lian to be kind and not cause trouble. And Qi Rong begs to see him, even if it's in a dream. And he has that phrase where he says, you ignore us. He's like, you're ignoring us. He's like, your parents worry. You're ignoring us, and you're high and mighty and cold because you're not there. It's like, oof. He says you're high and mighty and cold. And it's like, yeah, it'd be easy to understand why you would think that of the person you really care about, right? When they suddenly aren't there anymore. But Xie Lian can't do anything about it. Feng Shen again! Feng Shen is a supporter of Junwoo. He is a Junwoo supporter through and through. Feng Shen's like, this guy makes sense. I love it. But Feng Shen's like, no. And here's the thing. There is a part. I definitely agree with Junwoo with this portion of the whole once you become a heavenly official. Because the rule is that heavenly officials only if it is of utmost importance do you show yourself to mortals and avoid families, which is probably why he's not talked to Qi Rong very much, because he feels like Qi Rong would be the most sensitive to this rule. Makes sense. It kind of sucks. I mean, on the one hand, it does suck because he can't get in contact with his family. He's essentially cut off from them. He's ascended. He's transcended the corporal shell. He can't be, he says at one point that he had let go of the relations of old, right? And it only been 3 years, right? And then you look at 800 years later where he's like screaming that his mother's corpse has disintegrated. And it's like, well, that worked out great. I'm glad that all had no lasting emotional trauma. But yeah, so there is a part, though, that makes sense. I don't want to give Junwoo a hard time about this because I get why that rule exists, right? Because you're a heavenly official. You're essentially a god. You don't want to just waltz around being like, hey, everybody, I'm Xie Lian. I'm the deity of Shanla. Because, yeah, people would freak out, one, and people would constantly surge at him and he'd get nothing accomplished. And he could be threatened or wars could be caused, things like that. So, and with family, you're kind of in the most delicate and dangerous situation. So I get it. I get why that rule exists. It sucks for Xie Lian because Xie Lian, his whole thing was he wanted to ascend and help the common people. But because of the rules of the heavenly realm, he can't associate with the common people. So it puts an extra barrier between that goal and what Xie Lian wants to do and what's actually happening. So yeah, so Qi Rong, he does like, to be fair for Qi Rong, I like the Feng Shen and Xie Lian, they were debating, they're like, what is Qi Rong going to put on the lantern? Is it going to be something dastardly? No. He prays for the country's prosperity, right? And he writes neatly. And we get the memory of Qi Rong from being a child. And there's the thing where they go to the temple and the Goshis are all like begging for fortune telling. The grown-ups are begging the Goshi for fortune telling, for like assistance, like in their, they want like budget planning advice, things like that. And the kids play with small lamps. Like they're taught from a young age that, oh, well, when you get rich enough, you can write a prayer on this lamp and pay for it and get your prayers to come true, right? And so they're playing with the lamps. And what's interesting is that, I'm going to go back to the swing thing. I'm going to get there before. What's interesting is that Qi Rong, he wanted to write a prayer for his mother. And we might as well talk about the swing thing before we finish the lantern story. But Qi Rong, that when he came back with his mom was ostracized because she had ran off with a commoner, right? And so Qi Rong was made fun of and ignored because of it. It's not unlike Hua Chong, really. Hua Chong was ignored because he was born under the Star of Solitude. Qi Rong was ignored and shunned because he was born from a woman that, married a commoner and went and did something taboo. So there is a connection between Qi Rong and Hua Chong there. There is a little bit of similarity between them. But I feel bad for Qi Rong because, he didn't know what his mom was going to do. He didn't ask for that. That's not his fault, right? It's not his fault that that's his lineage. But that's just the way that things are, right? And so no one played with him because of his reputation. And the thing that gets me is that Xie Lian knew this. This is another thing, that at this point in the novel, the one thing I was like, Xie Lian, is that he knew I mean, they were going to talk about the lantern versus the swing scene afterwards, but Xie Lian knew that Qi Rong was shunned. And man, the metaphor of them on the swing, when the kids all, they gravitate around Xie Lian. Xie Lian is constantly the center of attention. He's the popular kid. And Qi Rong is in the shadow of his mother, who is this shunned and shamed woman. And he has no friends. And they're on the playground, and he sees Xie Lian get swung higher and higher. And that visual metaphor of Xie Lian looking down from on high, looking down from the highest peak, and seeing Qi Rong stuck in the shadows, looking at him with envy, green with envy. Yeah, because Qi Rong's like, you have it all, and I have nothing. It's like... So then we get the lantern scene. And these kids were the cruelest little kids. Like, they know that these are prayer lanterns. And they tricked him into writing on this, to taking this lantern, saying that I pray that my mother and I pass away to the heavens. Like, basically saying you and your mom go die. Like, that's what they put on the lantern. That's so mean. No, you little brats. And Xie Lian gets pissed. Now, this part, I am glad. Because Xie Lian is one that you don't make mad. I'm getting like shades by the end of chapter 70, I'm getting shades of like the second ascension and him fighting Junwoo. I'm so eager to know the contents of that, but we'll get there, so please don't spoil me. But yeah, but Xie Lian is like a bear. It's like he's fine, and then once you make him angry, you need to back the hell away. So he gets furious that they tricked him. Because, yeah, that's his aunt and his cousin at the end of the day. Like, that was awful. An awful thing to do. And so he just... I wonder... We talk about bad luck. There's 2 instances of bad luck and an ominous forewarning in this. And one, I wondered, was him shattering the lantern. Was him smacking the lantern down. Because it was a prayer lantern. So I wonder if that was like a bad luck sign. When he smacked the lantern down to defend Qi Rong. Who later becomes a ghost. So that's interesting. But yeah, he ends up writing Qi Rong a new lamp. And then later we see him at the swing, right? And at the swing the second time, Xie Lian is by himself. And Qi Rong goes to push him. And that was the moment he started following him and kind of worshiping him. But the thing that got me in that scene, again... It's really sad because you could be like, well, Xie Lian didn't know what to do. He didn't know any better. But at no point in these stories, like Xie Lian defends Qi Rong, right? He defends Qi Rong and gets Qi Rong's admiration kind of in the same way that he rescues Hua Chong and gets his admiration, right? They're very similar. But the thing that gets me about this entire chapter is that Xie Lian never asked Qi Rong to play with him. Like, at no point did he turn around and be like, hey, come play with me, or you be on the swings too. You come on. I mean, it's cool that he pushed Xie Lian, but Xie Lian was never like, oh, let me push you instead. As a kid, he never offered it. And he never offered, like, seeing Qi Rong in the shadows. He didn't get off the swing and be like, hey, do you want to turn? Because that would have been the example to set for those kids bullying. Was like, oh, well, you guys think I'm so popular? Well, I want my cousin to play with us, too. That'll make him on the same level as us. See, it's not nice to treat him unfairly. And it would make sense because later on when he's older, the people can't go against Qi Rong because he's royalty. So it's like, but then again, I mean, I don't want to fault Xie Lian. I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying Xie Lian's a bad person because I'm not. But it's so tragic because I'm like, there was an opportunity there. There was a chance for Xie Lian to really connect with his cousin and show him that, like, hey, I know everybody puts me on a pedestal, but you're right up there too, right? And he doesn't take it. And so it's kind of hard. It's just like, damn, you had a moment. You could have done something there, but you didn't do it. All right, okay, so we're not gonna, okay. And it's clearly impacted Qi Rong, right? It's clearly impacted. So Qi Rong kind of feels, I'm sure, a little bit betrayed by Xie Lian at this point, because he's like, hey, I've dedicated my whole life to you, and I've built you all these temples, and I've got you all these followers. Shouldn't you talk to me even if it's in a dream? Shouldn't you give me some recognition that you heard me, that you know what I've done, that you want to acknowledge it? come on, cuz. You know, and it doesn't happen. So I'm curious. It's gonna be interesting to see, and I'm thinking that we're gonna see in this novel, the downfall of Shanla. And I want to see, because now we know that Qi Rong is imitating that old life of Shanla in his cave. He has like the goblets, the gemstones, everything, the fancy royal table. He's trying to imitate the past, right? He's trying to recreate the past. And then he's so pissed at Xie Lian because he feels betrayed by him. That's why he has the statues of him, like, you know, in shame and like kneeling before him and everything, because he's like, well, you did nothing to save us, and why should I? Like, you totally betrayed us, cousin. I want to see that go down. I want to see the deterioration. And this series is 8 volumes long. I'm sure the deterioration is going to be illustrated in this somewhere, this volume or otherwise. And this chapter made me want to see it. I was like, okay. Because you see the seeds being planted in this chapter between these two. And now it's just like that juxtaposition of now, like whenever Qi Rong, and we'll get to it here in a little bit, talks about the statue and Xie Lian not falling. Oh my gosh, it's wild, right? It's wild. But anyway, getting back to the story, Xie Lian has the temper, and the others were scared of him, right? And so there is a note here that says that Qi Rong started out normal but veered off track. And the problem was that Xie Lian, he lost track of him and didn't know how Qi Rong had become, because he got so busy in his duties. And he said, they were saying in the book, like, he had no time for the relations of the past. Like, once you ascend, it's like a full-time job. You don't have time to think about your family and everything. So Xie Lian, he did not follow up with Qi Rong. And it wasn't his job to do so, right? But I do think I am glad MXTX notes like, hey, Qi Rong was kind of normal, but it just got worse and worse through a various amount of factors as he got older that led him to being the way that he is. And I hope we find out how Qi Rong died, as morbid as that is. Like, I have things I want to see. I want to see Qi Rong's fate, how he became a ghost, the whole deterioration of him and Xie Lian. I think the relationship between Qi Rong and Xie Lian is absolutely fascinating. And ever since we found out they were cousins, I was like, this is amazing. Like, one of the best, like, MXTX. I love this decision. Okay. So then this 24, 25-year-old guy with a satchel and straw slippers shows up. And that is our only picture in the entire book. That is the only picture that we get from the book, and it is of him. And they have a picture. I want to make note that Qi Rong looks so handsome there. Look at him. Look at Qi Rong in that. He looks so handsome. And then our guy Long Ying, he looks pretty normal, right? But they make Qi Rong in this look so handsome. He's such a which he kind of looks like Xie Lian. You can already see kind of the pointy ears. You can see the pointy ears, and his eyes look similar to Xie Lian. But yeah, this guy, this dirty peasant shows up. This boor shows up with this satchel across his shoulder. Now, when they said satchel in the book, in the chapter, I thought it was referring to like a little purse, but no, it's a body bag sized satchel, you know. But he shows up, he stumbles into the temple and asks for the king. And I want to make note with Long Ying. I want to put him right over here. Long Ying. He clearly seems like he's never been in the temple before, because he doesn't really understand what the statues and all of this is. But he needs to see the king to tell him of Yongen's problems. That is what he's going for. He's 24, 25, so he's a little bit older than Xie Lian. Just a wee bit. But he talks about, he sees the coins. So he stumbles into the temple, and Qi Rong is like, away with ye. Like, oh, I don't have time for you, scum. No. And so then as he's stumbling away, he sees the coins. And I love the way that MXTX describes it, where he just kind of like looks at the bridge like, what's this? And then he jumps down. And I love Qi Rong's, what the actual fudge? Like, oh my God, that line, Qi Rong, oh my God, it's amazing. Amazing. But yeah, saying like the money is just lying there. And so, but then this is his argument. He gathers up all this money and they're like, what are you doing stealing from the temple? And he's like, it's just here. Why can't I? So he's like, it doesn't belong to anyone. You've not gathered it up. So he's like, he says, well, I need this money to save my people. And it's just sitting here doing nothing. That's such a great commentary because, yeah, it's this idea of excess and waste. And it's so fascinating. It's such a fascinating commentary because when you think about it, it's like, it wasn't from the donation boxes, which are clearly probably being used to fund the temple and the people there. It's not like he was stealing from the donation boxes. He wasn't trying to steal one of the statues that people had spent money and time building specifically for the temple itself. So it wasn't vandalism or him trying to like rob anything from the temples. It's literally coins that people just threw into the pond. They've been sitting there for who knows how long, at the most 3 years. They're not paying for anything. They're just sitting there doing nothing. And he's like, well, what? My people need resources. This is just, you just have a mass amount of money just sitting here. Why don't we do something with it? Why can't you use it to help my people? And I don't blame him because it doesn't serve a purpose. I would understand if somebody was saying that, well, the money from the donation boxes and the temple and the statues and stuff, that's all for the benefit of the temple stuff. I'm like, yeah, no, I totally get that. And if your argument is, well, we can't use it because of so-and-so, but the coins are lying on the ground? Really? You couldn't use? And then I'm like, Xie Lian, you need to go into the founders' dreams and tell them to take the coins out of the ponds and use it to feed the poor. You know, use your influence a little bit. Get them to think that. But I'm sure there's a reason. I'm sure there's a reason it wasn't happening, right? Or that Xie Lian didn't think about it because, again, he didn't know anything about Yongin, so he thought everything was fine. Xie Lian didn't know to tell the people, the founders of the temples, to use the gold because he didn't think anybody needed it. Which is a pretty naive thought, because when you see how excessive they are with the temples, it's like, okay, who's falling through the cracks, right? Because if you're spending all this money and time on these temples, something is getting money taken away from it. Something is being stripped or not being funded. But Xie Lian, 17 when he ascends, was very naive and didn't think anything about it. And he's been too busy the last 3 years to have time to wonder about it. But yeah, so Long Ying, he's from Yongin. He says there's no water, no income, there's a drought. And it's a city within Shanla. So it's within their own borders, right? He says there is no water, income, and it's a drought. That could have been going on for 1 to 3 years. And Xie Lian didn't know about it. And so Xie Lian, he's kind of like, well, no one's heard about it, right? And Function's like, no. And I like that they did the cliffhanger of Mu Qing. They're like, did Mu Qing know about it? They just love saying Mu Qing up for the cliffhanger. It's actually hilarious. But Xie Lian tells Function, he's like, okay, go find Mu Qing, figure this all out. And what's interesting here is that Long Ying, he tells Qi Rong when he's accused of stealing, he's like, I'm not stealing. He's like, this isn't anybody's money, but you know what? Okay, I'll pray to this temple and I'll pray that Xie Lian gives me the money so I can go use it. That's the crazy thing, right? Is that the funny thing is that what he suggests is something that you could see a corrupt person doing, right? I could see a noble coming in and being like, oh, I have to pray to Xie Lian so that he'll give me the money to finish my home and to get my business started. Oh, and he says I can use this fund too. Like you can just see somebody doing it for a corrupt action to like use Xie Lian as a guise and a cover to like launder this money. But in Long Ying's case, he's like, well, that's what you all do anyway, so I'm going to do that to save my people. Is that cool? And Qi Rong, I love that Qi Rong has to think about it, like, no, you can't do it! And he uses the excuse and says that Xie Lian is too busy for you radicals. I want to see what did the book say that they called him instead of you radicals. What does he say there? He was saying that, let's find there, who has the time to mind unruly people like you. In the one web translation it says radicals, but it says unruly people like you. And Long Ying says, I didn't think he'd care either. It's like, because at this point, we don't know as the audience, but at this point his son is dead, his wife is dead likely, and he has nothing to live for. And he's like, yeah, I didn't figure he cared. It's like, oh my God. But yeah, he's like, we prayed and begged, but to no avail. So that's kind of a creepy world building thing too, is that they were praying, but they weren't doing it inside the temple. So Xie Lian didn't know about it. That's the scary thing, right? And so Long Ying, he does not think any heavenly official cares or is going to help him. I'll be honest, theory time. Crackpot conspiracy theory time. I had two thoughts instantly. One was Beauty and the Beast related, where it's like Maurice coming into the tavern being like, will no one help me? And so I felt like Long Ying was like Maurice being like, and then Qi Rong's like, crazy old Long Ying. He's always good for a laugh. Like, I just figured like that was Qi Rong just sitting there. We'll talk about the granddaddy comment. Dear God. But the other thing I thought of was like, what if, because here's the thing. Xie Lian, as we've come to figure out in the series, is connected to every character somehow, and knows every character. And so we know that he knows Hua Chong from an early age. We clearly know he's going to meet Bai Wushang, the terrifying white calamity, at some point. I'm going to guess in this book, unless we go back to the present and then we dive back into that later on. And then we know that he knows Qi Rong, who's one of the four. So that leaves the Blackwater, the mysterious Blackwater. Leaves that supreme. I think my crackpot theory is Long Ying is the Blackwater. That's what I think. I think Long Ying becomes the Blackwater through whatever happens, because I think Xie Lian's connected to all the calamities because he's the god of misfortune. He's collected the four calamities somehow, right? I think that the mysterious Blackwater, because they said he doesn't want anything to do with anybody. I think he knew Xie Lian while he was alive as a human, knew him as that cultivator. But I mean, it's like all the markers of a ghost in the making, right? Like Long Ying has all the markings of a ghost in the making. It's like either he's going to become a ghost or a god, I think at this point. He's either going to become a heavenly official or he's going to become a ghost. I'm leaning more towards ghost because he has a dead wife and kid, unmeasurable suffering and pain. Yep, check that box off. He's lost his wife and child. Unmeasurable amount of suffering and pain. I think he's going to go to the king of Shanla, and the king's going to be like, no, we're not helping you. More pain. I think he's going to end up dying of starvation or something. And I don't know, there's just something, the chapter one, the one chapter was called Fishing for Offerings. And that made me think of the Blackwater and like a boat, like a fisherman. So I could picture him being like, I could picture him dying and then wanting revenge on the gods for not helping his family and not helping Yongin. And so it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up going to Mount Tonglu and going through all that and then ending up the ghost of the Blackwater. And then he just kind of like becomes a recluse, right? I don't know. And he has one of the pearls. And it would make sense that the two ghosts that got out of Mount Tonglu were the two with the pearls. Because I think Hua Chong has one pearl, and I think he has the other. So I think he's the Blackwater, and it's going to all tie together. Maybe it ties together with this book being about water. Maybe, because look, the water gets blacker as we go. Maybe we'll meet the ghost of the Blackwater in this, and maybe it's tied to the pearl, and the pearl is symbolized there. So I've got my Charlie Day like conspiracy board. No, pearl, Blackwater, Long Ying, suffering ghost, Hua Chong. They both knew Xie Lian. Xie Lian took compassion for both of them. Xie Lian is probably going to go try to stand up for him. Nah. My crackpot theory is that Long Ying is the Blackwater. I could be wrong. Either he's the Blackwater or he ascends to be a god. Because I don't imagine Long Ying just being a rando that goes nowhere. But he could be. He could be. I wondered if the bandage boy, because Long is kind of tied maybe to Yongin, right? Because they said the bay. And they said the bay, right? They said in the chapter he was from the Bay of Long. A bay near water. There's the whole motif of him scooping up the dirt to the point where it pooled into water. And he ripped up the water from his hands, the muddy water, and drank it. Blackwater. That's my theory. My theory is Long Ying is the Blackwater. That's my theory right now. I will probably be proven woefully wrong within the next chapter. But that's my theory now, and I'm sticking to it. So please don't confirm or deconfirm, but that's where I'm at. That is where I'm at right now. So anyway, he goes there and he's like, he says that he's going to take the money and try to do anything, but he's like, we prayed and begged to no avail. And then he says, those meant to die will still die. And Xie Lian, that like shakes him. He's like, no, because that's not the way Xie Lian thinks. He says that those meant to die will die. And you know he's saying that to get him through this moment, because he's like, my wife and son have died. It must have just meant to have happened. Otherwise, what kind of heavenly official would let something so cruel happen to my child? And Xie Lian, who has like staked his claim as wanting to save the common people, Long Ying is common people, and he's not saved them at all. They're dying, and he's not done anything about it because he didn't know about it. And so Xie Lian is shaken, and Long Ying says it doesn't matter anymore. Because Qi Rong's threatening him this whole time. Qi Rong's like, like being like a feral possum. And he's like, I'm not afraid of not being saved, so why should I be afraid of being condemned? And that's such a great point, because it's like at this point, he's like, no one's saving me, so if they're not going to take the time to save me, why would they take the time to condemn me? So he's like, I'm not afraid. And it's like, oh my God, like it's just crazy. And so Qi Rong orders Long Ying to be hit in the name of the prince. And this part here, where Long Ying's like, wait a minute, you're a prince? Are you related to the king? Can you ask him to speak for me? And I want someone to make me a banner of Qi Rong being like, I am your granddaddy. What did the book say instead of, did it say granddaddy? Because that was insanity. Where he was like, he's like, he's like, you're a prince of what? Do you live in the palace? Can you meet with the king? I'm your granddaddy. You think you can still see the king? What the fudge? Qi Rong. I'm like, in one vein, within the span of 2 chapters, I go from feeling empathetic towards Qi Rong and being like, man, feel sorry for you, to being like, I'm your granddaddy, huh? Just absolutely ridiculous. But he says the king doesn't have time for you. And then Long Ying says this. He's like, then who does have time for me? He's like, if you don't have time for me, the king doesn't have time for me. Who's going to have time for me? I need somebody to have time for me. He's like, what do I do? Where do I go? He's like, does the king know how many have died? If they knew, why would they still be this wasteful? Like, he's asking all these really good questions. And Qi Rong just says, we'll spend our money however we want to. We don't have to give it to you. And he says, what gives you the right to have our money? Just because you're poor? I was like, oh my God, like this is a pretty big social commentary in this one chapter, because it brings up a really good point. It brings up a really good point, right? About materialism and about giving the coat off your back or giving out material things, right? And what's funny is they're in a temple. They're in a temple, right? And Xie Lian has said that he wants to save and protect the common people. And he's finally at a place where he could do that. And it's not happening. And instead, the rich are getting richer and the poor are being forgotten. And it's like, and it shakes Xie Lian to his core. He's like, what have I been doing these last 3 years? I didn't know these people were suffering. Why did it get so out of hand? Why has my father not done anything? Why has the royal capital not done anything? Like, he's just like, what's happening? Like, Xie Lian's having a mental breakdown because this man has come to them being like, we're dying and nothing's happening at all. And you have all of this waste that you could use to save all of us. And you're just throwing it away. And Qi Rong's like, it's our right to throw it away. He's kind of like, he's like that relative at the family dinner that's like, they should just go get a job. And it's like, but they don't have clothes. And he's like, well, they should just go get a job. And it's like, but they don't have transportation. They should just go get a job. And it's like, but this circumstance. And so, and I won't get political or anything, but there is a commentary there that Qi Rong is saying, well, we don't owe them anything. What's ours is ours. And this guy's like, but you're not using it for anything. It's just sitting here. And we're dying. And Qi Rong's like, not my problem. It's a heavy commentary. It's really heavy. I'm like, holy shit, MXTX. Like, just bring it out. And poor Xie Lian is you have Long Ying on one side of the equation saying like, help us, you have the means. You have Qi Rong on the other side of the equation saying like, no, not our problem. Even though it's their country, it kind of is their problem. And then you have Xie Lian being like, why aren't we trying anything at all? Like Xie Lian's like, we should try something. And so he's frustrated, right? And so Xie Lian, he's about to seal Qi Rong's mouth, which gave me definitely Lan Wangji vibes. He was about to use the silencing spell, which I thought was funny. And then Mu Qing just casually arrives, like, hey, what's up, what'd I miss? And says that he knows nothing. And Feng Xin has been, like, suspicious since day one with Mu Qing, all the time. And Feng Xin's like, what do you mean you didn't know? How could you not know? And Mu Qing actually has a pretty decent response. Mu Qing's like, well, I was watching the temples during the odd months, and you were watching during the even months, so how did I not miss it, but you did? And it's like, yeah. So Mu Qing makes a pretty good point. Apparently, it just wasn't known, right? And Feng Xin's just like, you think too much. I like that line by Feng Xin where he's like, you think too much. It almost, in the book, read as, like, kind of soft. Like, he was just kind of like, why do you have to be this way, Mu Qing? I ship them kind of too, both of them. They're pretty great. But Qi Rong, like, orders his men to, like, assault Long Ying. I like the idea that the deities can, like, soften the blows. They kind of act like, it's weird. They're like ghosts. I'm like, what? Wait a minute, MXTX. Like, the parallels continue because they can interact without being seen. You know, like a ghost would. And it's so funny, the comparisons between the two. But he, like, softens the blows so that the guy isn't kicked nearly as hard. And Xie Lian is frustrated. Xie Lian's like, how am I? He's like, you're not supposed to show yourself to mortals, but then how can you help the mortals? And so it's like, Xie Lian's like just getting so wound up. He's like, how can I help this man when I can't even talk to him? There's a barrier there. And it does seem like the heavenly realm has created its own barrier. It's created a barrier. And here's the sad thing. The barrier between the mortal realm and the heavenly realm. And the thing about it is that it's taking an idea from Junwu that's not a bad idea and going the very extreme route with it is what Xie Lian's kind of bringing up. Because I do agree. I will give Junwu credit. It is probably not a good idea as a deity for you to show up on your family's doorsteps, because it's like when you win, it's like when a person wins the lottery and suddenly, like, the family comes out of the woodwork and they're like, oh, won't you give us some of it? Won't you give us some of it? Don't we deserve a big portion of it? And then all the family and friends start to get, like, greedy about it. I feel like that's where Junwu is coming with it, being like, yeah, once you ascend, you can't go to the family dinner anymore, because then everybody's going to start asking things of you, and that's not fair, and it's not your job. So I get Junwu's reasoning behind keeping that barrier there. The problem is that most of the people in the heavenly realm have just used that barrier as an excuse to not be involved at all, to completely, like, shun themselves up in their fancy palaces in the sky and been like, okay, you guys are good down there, okay, bye, and not worry about it. And Xie Lian's trying to stay on the ground to do something. And I feel like Xie Lian's like the only heavenly official that's there on the ground trying to do stuff. I feel like everybody else is up with Junwu in the heavenly realm, looking down upon the plebeians and being like, well, they'll figure it out. And Xie Lian's down there in the trenches trying to do his part to save the common people, but he can't do anything because there's too much red tape, and he's just hit wall after wall after wall and hurdle after hurdle. So it's sad, right? It's very sad. And we'll get to this part here, where Xie Lian is frustrated, and so he decides to topple his own statue. He's like, well, you know what? I'm just going to knock over the statue. So again, a very ominous sign. An ominous sign that he knocks over his own statue. He knocks it over. Like this will distract him so I can go talk to that guy. And Qi Rong, when Qi Rong was screaming, being like, don't let the crown prince fall. He mustn't fall. Like that, just that idea that Qi Rong holds so much investment into Xie Lian. And the crazy thing is that you have him screaming, don't fall, 800 years ago. And then later, in the present, you have him basically screaming to Xie Lian, fall with me. Right? It's just, oh my God. He's just like, the contrast of Qi Rong telling Xie Lian not to fall and that he mustn't, to him screaming in his cousin's face, being like, yeah, fall with me. Let's do this. Oh, it's crazy. Crazy talk. But Xie Lian, and Xie Lian again, he's like, well, it's just a chunk of gold. It's just a chunk of gold. Xie Lian's like, I don't care about all this excess. Again, that's such a problem because it's like, if he could just go into the dreams of the people in the capital, which I think is what he's going to do in the next chapter. He's going to go to the capital people and be like, what you been doing? Let's use some of this wealth we've amassed to help the people of Yong'an. I feel like Xie Lian, he's just like, I don't care about all this nonsense. He's like, I just want to help people. And he makes Mu Qing and Feng Xin stay behind. And I like that they just have to use a finger to hold the statue down. Like, that's how much power they have at this point. They just have to use a finger to hold this gold statue down against all these people trying to lift it up. It's absolutely insane. So, Xie Lian gets the idea that he's going to disguise himself as a white-clad cultivator with a whisk. I picture him wearing the robes he's wearing now, or kind of similar to it, to go and talk to Long Ying. Right? The funny thing about all of this is that, like, Junwu establishes the laws, like, you can't go see your family, you can't interact with the mortals unless it's of utmost importance. 800 years later, Xie Lian don't care. Everybody he's encountered in the present timeline, like, all the people of Banyu, like, the one kid said he wasn't going to tell anybody, but, like, the people of Banyu, the people wandering around while he was General Hua, like, he didn't ever specifically say he was, you know, the deity Shanla, the Prince of Shanla, but he did interact with all these mortals, which was exactly what Junwu in these chapters is telling him not to do. So that's just kind of funny to me. It's like, present time Xie Lian's like, nah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. But he dresses and disguises himself and sees Long Ying digging the hole. And at first I was trying to decide, was he digging the hole to bury his son then and there? But he wasn't. Going back and rereading, he wasn't. He ends up deciding after the fact, he's like, oh yeah, I guess I could bury my son here. He was just getting a drink of water from the, like, mud puddle. Like, he was so desperate. I was like, you could have just gone to that pond and got a drink if you wanted to, rather than the mud puddle. And Xie Lian's like, what are you doing? He's like, no. And he says he's from the Bay of Long Air. Right? So it's like he's from the Bay with his town people. I'm like, a bay. Black water. That's my theory. My crack theory. Crack theory of the week is that Long Ying is the black water. We'll see if it holds. We'll see if it holds water. If that theory holds water in itself. But he's like, after he's like, I'm not going there anymore. It's like, I'm not going back. It's like he's just at the end of his rope. And you wonder if he's like going to kill himself, or what is he going to do if he's going to see the king and then he has nothing to live for. His family's gone. Right? Ugh! His son died on the way. And that moment where Xie Lian's like, what did he die from? And he just, like, looks bemused. He's like, what did he die from? Well, I don't know. Hunger? Thirst? Sickness? All of the above? It's like, geez, oh my gosh, it's awful. And then that description of him, like, crying when they left and then coughing and then going silent. It's bone chilling. Like, it's disturbing. I, like, had Grave of the Fireflies flashbacks. I was like, it's enough to make you want to cry. Like, it's just so sad. And Xie Lian is absolutely, like, heartbroken. And he talks about how he's like, well, my wife would yell at me, you know, for being such a terrible father. He's like, I wish she could yell at me. Meaning that she's probably dead too. And that's probably why he left with the kid, because she died. And so that was the straw. He's like, my wife died, my kid was sick, so I left with him to go find help. Because otherwise he probably would have left the kid with the mom, right? You would think so. But if she was dead, he didn't have a choice, so he took him with him. And the other thing that makes me think he's the Blackwater is that the book talks about how's the book described? In the online version, it said a pool of dead water without trace of life or ripples. Yeah, his expression had stayed calm the entire time, like a branch snapped from a withered tree or a pool of dead water without ripples or any trace of light. Xie Lian's throat constricted, unable to swallow. Yeah. Whoof, 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 indeed. And so, yeah. And so Xie Lian, he thanks Xie Lian for suggesting that he bury him. And I love that Xie Lian's like, do not thank me. Like, I just found out all this is happening. Do not thank me. No, 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 no. Like, he's instantly like, absolutely not. And so Xie Lian, he gives him the other red pearl. And I like the book talks about how the man instantly knew that this was something very invaluable. Like, just, like, this is something. And so he just takes it with him like, But it's something that Xie Lian knows to him has value. And I like that Mu Qing kind of goes, you can see Mu Qing going, that pearl, like it just, he has a reaction to it. But Xie Lian's like, no, you take it. And he says, Dad will come back, son, to visit you. So that's curious. So this was at the pavilion, right? But it was not at Mount Taiseng. That's the thing. Because when he said that, like going back and rereading it, I reread the chapter before starting this discussion. There was a part of me that's like, okay, well, in the present timeline, maybe Long Ying shows up to save Xie Lian from killing Mu Qing. Maybe he shows up to tell him not to do it. I don't know. And so maybe he'll show back up in the present timeline. But he wasn't at the Shanla Pavilion, the very first one. Where they're at now in the book is not at the top of Mount Taiseng, so it's not the same place. So maybe not. But I'm curious if Xie Lian will ever go back to that spot where that kid was buried. I don't know. And so, and I can't recall, but is this the first time in the flashback that Xie Lian's done the forehead thing? Is this the first time he's done the forehead press? Because he does like the thing with his forehead, like, Is this the first time in the flashback he's done it? I can't recall. But he says Yong'an, and then Mu Qing gives the report that Yong'an is not wealthy. They have few temples and shrines because the local rule is that you have to pay to pray. The poor cannot enter. And Xie Lian gets pissed. Xie Lian's face darkens. He's like, oh, hell no. I did not have these temples constructed in them to not be accessible. No. And so he sends Mu Qing and Feng Shen to take care of some things, and he's going to go to the Goshi and talk to them, and because he believes that the royal palace likely knows this is going on. He's like, the royal palace knows what's going on. They're just not saying anything. And I'm like, so yeah. And that's where we end the chapters. Holy cow. Well, oh my gosh. There's a lot going on already. We start, I was like, oh, we'll have a fun and engaging swashbuckling romp to start out volume 3. And instead it's about feeling bad for Qi Rong and there's child death. So a man carrying a dead baby in a satchel, and Qi Rong, his tragic backstory continues. Thanks, MXTX. Is this water that's on the cover all of our tears? I feel like it could be. I feel like it could be. I do have a feeling I'm going to like this volume. This volume is actually longer than volume 2, if I'm correct. I think someone said volume 3 is longer than volume 2. So we're in for the long haul, baby. So I hope y'all are ready. Next week, I have down that I'm going to be reading chapter 71 through chapter 73, which is parts 30 and 31. If chapter 87 of the Manhua is out, I'll look at it too, but it may be the following week before I get to it. Maybe that following week. Yeah. But holy cow. So yeah, I'm pretty excited though, y'all. It's going to be a fun time. So I hope you all are excited. I am too, but please no spoilers, hints or clues. I'm going to find it out in the novel. Don't worry. If I'm wrong about the Long Ying theory, it's okay. I'll figure it out. We'll cross that bridge over the gold shimmering coins when we cross it. So I do hope, though, that you have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with the next set of chapters for Heaven Official's Blessing. Bye.